Hey there, VC. Hope you're doing well. Haven't made a video in almost a whole year, so wanted to try this out. Doing a little bit of a different system here. Basically, my iPhone camera is broken right now, so I'm doing a little bit of a webcam video here. Just wanted to hop in and do the jazz vinyl tag. This is done by Chris at Tunes from the Man Cave, one of my favorite channels in the VC, somebody who is so personable, has such great knowledge of jazz, and has such passion for the music. I hadn't been wanting to make a video for quite a while just because of the trolls in the VC, just various things. I just didn't want to deal with it anymore. But people like Chris and his channel really inspire me to be a part of this community, and talk about records and the passion for music. And so let's just go ahead and dive into it. He has 10 questions. So definitely wanted this to be my return to the VC video to do his tag. So the first question he has on this tag is the favorite jazz find of 2022. So I was going through my collection, my finds in 2022, and for me, the biggest goal in 2022 was to find a Blue Note original pressing in the wild, something that I had been wanting to find for years, but I just made it my main goal to find it in the bins, not just online, not just on Discogs, but actually finding it in a store. And it was a good success last year. I did find one, but actually two copies of the same record. So I found this a couple of or a few months back, in late 2022. This is Lee Morgan's The Sidewinder original stereo pressing. An incredible hard bop classic, an album that's been so important to me as I was getting into jazz. And so you can see that Blue Note label there. Really incredible record. And so found this a few months back in late 2022. And then just a few weeks later, at a different record store, I found yet another copy of the Sidewinder. And they were both pretty cheap. I mean, like under $70, which you don't tend to see Blue Note original stereo copies going for that price. And this is definitely not one of the most rare Blue Note originals to get. But I was just so thankful to find this out in the wild, a really important jazz record. So super thankful to find this, and definitely my favorite find, jazz wise, in 2022. The second question is the first jazz album that you fell in love with. For me, the record that really got me into the genre was A Tone Poet. I was getting into jazz a little bit more, listening to Miles Davis, but the album that really made it click completely for me was the first Tone Poet that I ever bought. So have it right here. This is Stanley Turrentine Hustlin', with the great Shirley Scott, amazing organ player, Bob Crenshaw on bass. You got Kenny Burrell playing guitar and Otis Finch. An amazing lineup. And, for one, just I've always loved like the packaging of records and the photos included and the design of it. I mean, everything about this release, I think, is pretty much perfection. I still think that the Tone Poets are the gold standard as far as record releases are concerned. And so, you get that classic crack of the Tone Poet there. Trying to get this all on camera, as you can see, but really nice photography there, done by the great Francis Wolff. The Reed Miles cover art is just fantastic. And the grooviness, the bluesiness of this record really got me into the genre. I really started out collecting vinyl, getting blues records and soul records. And I feel like this record really is on the more bluesy, soulful vibe. It has more of a soul jazz kind of feel to it. that really was very accessible to me, and it immediately made me want to explore more genres of jazz. But I would say soul jazz is what really got me into the genre, and definitely Hustlin' is still my favorite jazz album, I think, of all time. I love Stanley Turrentine and Shirley Scott. The way they play off each other, I find so engaging and so entertaining to listen to. But this record I still put on frequently. I mean, at least once a week. An incredible release. So definitely my favorite jazz album of all time and the record that really got me into jazz. So there you go. The third question, let me get to the list here. The most far out jazz record in your collection. I've been getting more into free jazz in the past few years. I was getting more into soul jazz and hard bop, and then free jazz was the next genre for me. And I picked up a few free jazz records last year, including this one, a nice reissue of Ornette Coleman's Free Jazz. This I would say is probably the most far out there in my collection thus far. Not a totally accessible record, but I think if you're looking to get into free jazz, this is one that I would highly recommend. And a nice package here done by Org Music. This is a double 45 RPM record, really excellent. Highly recommended for me. If you're looking to get into the free jazz genre, this was a very nice pickup. So the most far out jazz record in my collection, Free Jazz by Ornette Coleman. So a record from a lesser known jazz label. Let's get into that. So I was looking through my collection. This album is more of an archival release, not something that was released back in the day, more of an archival release in Record Store Day, for the Record Store Day list, a record label called Reel to Reel. This is the George Coleman Quintet in Baltimore. This record was recommended by Bob Bradley, the Bob Bradley YouTube channel that I'm a big fan of. Somebody whose enthusiasm and passion for music is just infectious. And he recommended this album as a Record Store Day release. Checked it out and immediately bought it. Fantastic. This is, I believe, yes, it is cut by Kevin Gray at Coherent Audio. And this label, Reel to Reel, does really nice archival recordings, usually live concerts. I have another Cannonball Adderley release that they did. They're doing a Shirley Scott release for Record Store Day later this year that I'm very excited to get. But everything on this label. They also have an Eddie Lockjaw Davis release that's really great. But everything off this label I get. I think it's just a no-brainer for me. And a label that is lesser known, that isn't talked about enough. Great jazz label, Reel to Reel. So there you go, the George Coleman Quintet. Now, getting to the next question here. An artist only released as a session leader. So I picked out a record that I don't think is talked about very often in the VC. That is Art Taylor's At's Delight. So this is a record that was very underrated and was part of the 80th series. And before the Blue Note Classic series, they did this 80th anniversary series, and this was a part of it. And this sounds phenomenal. And what a great lineup on this. Stanley Turrentine is featured on this. You get the great Wynton Kelly on piano. Another record that was a really defining album for me as I was getting into jazz, as I was digging into Stanley Turrentine's discography and looking at the records that he played on. This one popped up, checked it out, and I love it. Also, that cover art is so great. Really nice pressing. Just a fantastic album from start to finish. And Art Taylor, not somebody who's really discussed much as a session leader, but I just love his records. And this one is really great. So there you go. Let's get on to the next question. We're halfway through the list here. a major artist release on a small jazz label. So I chose a record that's, to me, is a small label. I don't know much about this label. Probably a lot of you in the comment section will tell me more about this, but the VJ label I wasn't really familiar with. And this album from Wynton Kelly is a smoker. Wynton Kelly, one of my favorite piano players, I think right up there with Bill Evans as one of my favorite jazz piano players. But you get a great lineup on this. You know, Paul Chambers on bass, Sam Jones on here as well, Jimmy Cobb on drums. I found this at my local record store in San Antonio, Texas, that I miss dearly, Crazy Rhythms, which always had a really solid jazz collection on display. And this record rules. It's just so good from start to finish. This is an original copy on the VJ label. Not very familiar with it, but really glad I picked this up. Pretty much grabbed it just because Wynton Kelly was on it, and so glad I did. It's a really good record. And moving on, we have the next question: favorite early morning jazz album. Lately I've really been getting into Wayne Shorter. We lost him earlier this year, and I've been putting on this album pretty much every morning over the past couple weeks. This is an album by Wayne Shorter, Adam's Apple. So this is an original press. I was actually lucky to get this from Patrick, the vinyl archivist, who does these really great auctions here in the VC, and got this for a really great price. The cover is beat up a little bit, but the disc is in really nice shape. And I mean, this session, everyone on this, I think, is playing to the best of their ability. As I've been listening to this, I seriously think that Herbie Hancock's piano playing on this record is my favorite session playing that he's ever done. I just love everything he does on this record. And of course, Wayne Shorter killing it on this record. This is definitely my favorite of Wayne Shorter's Blue Note output. So super thankful to have this. I've been really tempted to get the Blue Note classic version of this, just because, even though I don't really need a reissue, I think just to have a really nice, completely clean copy of it would be nice to have. Maybe do a little bit of a shootout with that eventually. So that's something that's been on my want list, to get the Blue Note classic version of Adam's Apple. But such a fantastic record. Love this. And just an album I can put on early in the morning as I'm getting up for work, and just getting my day started, and gets everything off to a good start. So next question, a good late night jazz album. So when I was thinking about late night jazz albums, typically think, you're having a cocktail, you're maybe having some people over, you want something a little groovy, something that's going to get people dancing a little bit. Going with this Tone Poets, this is Face to Face by Bobby Face Winnettes, or Willettes. This is a smoking jazz album, so killer. I really love soul jazz. I love that kind of groovy organ sound. And this is just killer from start to finish. Definitely one of my favorite tone poets, a tone poet that I definitely listen to more so than a lot of other tone poets. You get Grant Green on guitar, of course, so smooth on this, with the great Fred Jackson on tenor sax. And of course, you get that beautiful photography there. Don't you love that tone poet crack sound that you get? Just wonderful. But love this album so much. Definitely one of the tone poets that I go back to more so than others. So great late night jazz album. And we have a few more, or maybe just a couple. We have a couple more questions left. A jazz album that makes you think or inspires you. Good question. I was looking through things and I wanted to choose an album that was a little more out there, something that just makes you think a bit more, that's very provocative. Going with Pharoah Sanders with Alice Coltrane. Such an amazing record on Impulse. This is an original copy. I was just so thankful to find an original copy back in 2021 at my local record store, Crazy Rhythms, for $50. Which, if you see what originals are going for these days, this album goes for a ton. Not in perfect shape, a lot of ring wear here, but the disc is in very good shape. And they did a reissue of this recently. I haven't heard the new reissue. I've heard it's very well done, done by that Verve by Request series. But Alice Coltrane with Pharoah Sanders, the way they play off each other in this record is just so gorgeous. And I'm not going to pronounce the title of it, Bata something, but a really great record. Something that I love so much is just the improvisation in jazz and the way that Alice Coltrane and Pharoah Sanders go back and forth on this record is just truly inspiring and a sheer beauty. So, really great record. One of those just holy grails in my whole jazz collection. So, getting to the last question here, a jazz album with a boring cover. So, I chose a record that, to me, is a pretty bland cover. A great jazz record, though. On Milestone, you get McCoy Tyner, Inner Voices. Very abstract, very minimalist. Some people might like this cover. I just found it to be pretty boring. If I saw this in a record store, I probably wouldn't have picked it up. But when you see McCoy Tyner on a record, you just gotta pick it up. Chris also showed a record on Milestone by McCoy Tyner that is so killer as well. And I think everything that McCoy Tyner did on that Milestone label is really worth picking up. A bit more on the free jazz and spiritual jazz side of things, but just so gorgeous. One of the greatest piano players. I mean, Wynton Kelly, Bill Evans, McCoy Tyner, there's your top three for me as far as piano players are concerned in jazz. But kind of a boring cover, but a really great record with a lot of good people playing on this. You also get Jack DeJohnette's, the lovely Ron Carter on bass, but fantastic records. So good bunch of jazz there. I'll be back with another video. Went to a record show this weekend, so I found a couple things there. Also got some other jazz finds from a couple of auctions here in the VC, so I'll be showing off that this week, but just hoping to get some more videos out there. I've missed you all in the VC. I've missed interacting with people in the vinyl community, so wanted to get back out there, make another video, support Chris from Tunes from the Man Cave. Just absolutely one of the best channels in the VC and somebody you should really support. So I'll put a link to his channel in the description below, but please leave a comment of what you thought of these jazz records. I'd love to talk with you in the comments, and we'll talk later this week. So thanks so much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys later. Thanks so much.